So, you know, of course there are about 1 billion different ways to do a spout. I'm gonna just teach you one way that I feel is the simplest overall in hand building. You know, I could coil an entire spout if I wanted to. That would take a lot of time. So I kind of figured out this way that is a little bit easier. So I'm gonna take a small piece of clay. Now, your teapots are not that large, so you don't need a huge spout. One of the biggest things about teapots is that the spout should be wider when it's at the attachment point and narrower at the point where it's pouring out of, right? So a traditional teapot. So the liquid will come through the vessel and then have a smaller opening, so that's imperative that you have this cone shape. It's also pretty imperative that it does not just stick out straight from the vessel. It has some sort of lift upward, because if it stuck out straight from the center of the vessel, well, you could only fill liquid about halfway up then, right? Because if it's straight, the liquid's just gonna come right out. So it has an upward lift. So this is where we go back to the fun bevel edge cutting. Yeah, so you're gonna get upward lift through the style of cut that you do to your spout. So those are really important. So I'm just gonna take this little lug of clay here. It's not that pretty, but it's pretty symmetrical, right? It's decent. And we have all these wooden dowels over here. There's skinnier ones. I wouldn't go with the very, very skinny one, but this is the size that I picked. So I'm gonna really make sure that I'm putting this in the center. Try and get it as close as possible to come through the center of the other side. So now I'm gonna start kind of squeezing that clay. So I'm forming kind of this taper, like this. Weird. So it's getting narrower to the top. Okay. At this point, if I want to texture it, I usually will do my texture. So let's say this one. Because I have the support of that dowel inside, it's easier to texture now. And you don't have to texture the spout if you don't want to. Any texture that gets sort of erased, I can put back lightly, but I at least like to get it overall pretty textured. What I'm gonna do next is I'm going to clean up how the opening looks. So I'm just gonna take my knife and I'm just gonna do a clean cut, because sometimes it'll get really distorted. And now I'm gonna slide my dowel out. All right, now I only have this little tiny hole. So what I do is I dampen my finger and I'm gonna start widening out the back of this. So this is gonna give me that automatic taper. And I can also kind of use my pinching method to kind of pinch this out a little bit more. I'm trying to be gentle so I don't distort that much of my texture, but again, I can put it back. It's not the end of the world. So this is what I end up with. It's definitely wider here, narrower here. Looks good. All right. Now I need to decide placement on my form. So remember I said I can't take this spout and just attach it straight on. I mean, that looks really weird. I want it to have an upward lift. So in order for it to have an upward lift, I need to kind of do a 45-degree angle cut of this spout. So it's about 45 degrees that way, about 45 degrees that way. So I'm drawing myself like a guide line, like that. All right. I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna cut this. So now I have it like this shape. All right, so what I still need to do now is I need to now flare this up. So I'm gonna pinch this. I can at this point if I want to. If I don't like all of this excess here, or maybe if I wanted this rounded, I could take away those corners. All right, so it's all flared. That's what it looks like. And so now, when I put it up against the piece, just from that cut, it has a nice upward lift to it. So what I like to do is I like to first kind of put the spout on. I like to look at maybe, you know, this area that I trimmed isn't as even as possible. So I'm gonna do some refining trimming. So it just looks nice and clean and overall round in the attachment. And I'm pretty happy with that placement. All right. So now, I'm gonna take my needle tool and I'm gonna do a trace around the spout. All right, now I'm gonna remove the spout. Now I need to cut a hole in this vessel so liquid can pour from the vessel into here. Now I have the option, what I don't want to do is I don't want to cut all the way up to this line because then I'm not giving myself any attachment point. So if I do want to cut one singular hole, I just want to cut further inward, right? Not at the line that I traced. Or you could take your fettling knife, you put this in, twist, and some teapots will have, good tool, little holes. And again, for this project, I wouldn't recommend putting in little tiny holes. I know that there are teapots that do filter loose tea and stuff like that through the spout. That's kind of difficult to do, especially with the glazing style that we're doing. You're just gonna clog every hole. So keep the holes relatively big. These holes will not clog with glaze unless I really overdo the amount of glaze on the interior of the piece. So 3 looks good. And I'll just refine those so they're nice and clean. All right. So I have this nice little trace mark, which is great. So I'm gonna score to the inside of that trace mark because I know that won't be visible, and that is where my connection point is. This form has set up. My spout and my handle are my last attachments. So I will need to use slip for this and score well. The spout is really what's going to make or break your teapot. It gives it personality and character, shows its utilitarian, its ability to be utilitarian or not. So I'm giving that a nice score. Okay, I'll take my spout. I like to give this a light score, just so it's really stuck. And again, I'm kind of flaring it out more, because I want that nice attachment. So I'm gonna line it back up, make sure it's straight. And again, it's the same thing. It's your score marks locking together. I do not need to blend and push all of this in. if I don't want to. And I could even now go back if I want this to seem really seamless, because this is the area probably that, you know, I would erase is around here. So that's an easy place to be able to retexture. And I can, if I wanted to, just lightly maybe maneuver the spout so it just has a different curve to it. I can do things like take my knife if I wanted a different opening for this, and just cut back. So that's giving it that kind of blunt cut opening that some people like. So I have all those options. Again, the most important thing is that the spout has that kind of taper. You do that 45-degree angle cut, trace, cut smaller than the trace hole, and attach your spout. So this one's coming along nicely. Again, the lid is now refined. It has this little notch to be able to guide me back there. And this one was the other lid that I demonstrated, where this is now has this connection here that fits down in here. So it has a little give, but not a ton. So I'm planning on doing a spout for that. For both of these, I would like to do handles that are overarching. You don't have to, you can do a handle on the side. For arching handles, what's important, and with any handle, what's important is that in order for the handle to seem very stable, it is helpful to have a wider connection point or thicker connection point at where the body attaches to comparison to where you're lifting it. So with this slab, I just cut this so it was more wider there, narrower here, and I gave myself kind of an idea. How wide is this handle going to be? All right, and I try and keep this steady and just lay it down. I usually like to attach these not at a total leather hard, because I might need to bend them slightly to get them perfect, but definitely set up enough that they're holding their shape.